Hello everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So it is the first week of this month, which means we are going to be talking about my read of the month. So today we have The Gifts of Imperfection by Dr. Brene Brown. Now Dr. Brene Brown has honestly stolen my heart. So a little background on her. She is a research professor who started out as a social worker, and her work and her research is based on courage, vulnerability, and worthiness. I mean, I remember when I read these, I was like, what? Somebody can actually study those, actually conduct real studies and what have we on these very primitive, basic human emotions or experiences. But anyways, I was mind blown. So this book is called Gifts of Imperfections. So basically what it's all about is that we are human, and by virtue of being human, it means that we are imperfect, which means that we get to practice vulnerability on a daily basis. And through practicing vulnerability, that's when we get these gifts which are courage, connection, and compassion. And when you're a person who embraces imperfection and vulnerability, she calls that living a life that is wholehearted. And a definition of a wholehearted living is that we engage with our lives from a place of worthiness, that no matter what gets done or how much is left undone, I am enough. When I read this, I was like, oh, this is the kind of book I'm trying to read. This is the kind of person I'm trying to be, because there have been so many times where I have felt inadequate, where I felt unworthy, or where I felt I need things to make me worthy, whether it is accolades, it is qualifications, it is losing weight, type of body that I have, it is the friends that I hang out with, so many things that we attach our sense of worthiness to, that are on earth, when in reality, by just existing, the fact that you are here, God saw it fit to have a you that exists here, you are worthy. Anyways, carrying on into what the book actually speaks about: connection, courage, and compassion. Now I'm going to talk about these three things, then I want to talk about what gets in the way of us living a wholehearted life, and then that will basically be the end of my talk today about this book. First thing is courage. Now when you look into the word courage, its root word is cor, which is from the Latin word meaning heart, right? So the original meaning of courage was to speak one's mind by telling all of one's heart. Me personally, I was shook. I was just like, what? Because in today's world, courage has become synonymous with being heroic, right? Which, you know, there's nothing wrong with being heroic. We need heroes in the world. But then what this original meaning wants from us is that we speak honestly and openly and fully of what's in our hearts, who we are, where we come from. It requires vulnerability. In a place where heroics requires you to place your life on the line, ordinary courage, as Dr. Brene Brown calls it, ordinary courage requires you to put your vulnerability on the line. An example that she makes in the book is this whole thing of leaving room for disappointment. You know, when you are wanting to get into that job, or wanting to qualify for that course, or sometimes even have it, you are in this great relationship, right? When job is going great for you, you're in this great relationship, but instead of actually allowing yourself to experience the happiness and the joy in its fullness, you leave room for disappointment, just in case this doesn't work, just in case the other shoe drops. Well, what she discovered here is that actually the reality of the situation is that whether or not you leave room for disappointment, hurt will hurt the same. Okay, like you will feel the hurt the same way if ever you are disappointed. But what it does is that it robs you of that joy that you were supposed to feel in that moment, that you were supposed to experience in that moment. I remember this was a few years back, not even a few years back, a little while ago. there was a time when I was really struggling with this, because I am naturally a very optimistic person. I am naturally the kind of person that just believes that everything will work out for the best. Nothing will ever go wrong. It's a little, but my mother is the opposite of that. And she would always tell me, like, Sino, the world will hurt you. Sino, you won't make it with that kind of attitude. Earth requires you to leave room for disappointment, not get too excited, not allow yourself to live in the joy too much. And I remember I spoke to Usamge, shout out if you're watching this video. Usamge, she studied psychology, and I was like, I'm really struggling with this concept, because now I'm scared to allow myself to feel. But what she said to me was literally what Dr. Brene Brown says here. She's just like, the thing is, whether you allow yourself to live in the joy or not, it's gonna hurt. So you might as well indulge in the joy. Otherwise, your whole life will just be filled with leaving room for disappointment, and you will never experience full joy. And so this is what courage actually is. This is the not even redefining, it's just going back to the actual meaning of courage. Courage is daring to love, daring to be happy, daring to dream, daring to put yourself out there, even in the face of risk of hurt, risk of heartbreak, risk of disappointment, risk of whatever. Secondly, she spoke about compassion. I have to say this one was my favorite. So compassion is derived from Latin words pati and cum. I'm not sure how to pronounce them. It's pati and cum, meaning to suffer with. Can we just a moment? To suffer with. This definition, it explains why compassion is not our default, response, because the human mind will always want or look for what's the easiest to do. So what we usually do is that we run to self-protect, and we do this by looking for someone or something to blame, turning to judgment, or immediately going into fixing mode. So a quote that Dr. Brene Brown includes in this section is from Buddhist nun Pema Chodron. This I'm taking with me for life. It says, in cultivating compassion, we draw from the wholeness of our experience, our suffering, our empathy, as well as our cruelty and terror. It has to be this way. Compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It's a relationship between equals. Only when we know our darkness well can we be present with the darkness of others. Compassion becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity. Can we just have a whoa? First of all, it is not a relationship between the wounded and the healer. It is a relationship between equals. My whole understanding of compassion has been upside down, quite obviously, because when I think of compassion, I think of, what's that famous Bible story? I think of the Good Samaritan. Yeah, I think of the story of the Good Samaritan, where there is this guy who's almost dead, and there are these people who are in a position to be the healers, to be the helpers, right? But they don't do that, and then the Good Samaritan does that, and that makes him good. And for me, that has been the example of what compassion is. And I've always understood it as, there's the healer, the one who's up there, and then there's the one who's down there. But really, that's not what compassion is. That's more of a pity situation. But what Chodron is saying here is that it requires us to draw from our shared humanity experience. That for me to be able to empathize with the person who's going through the most, I have to draw from my own darkness. And a lot of people, or a lot of us, are not able to sit in other people's darkness, because in order for you to be there for that person, you gotta sit in their darkness with them, right? And a lot of us are not able to do that because we can't sit with our own with our very own darkness. How could we possibly suffer with someone else? Because compassion is to suffer with, right? And this is why, like I said, we judge, or you immediately want to just go into fix it. How can we fix this? How can we make this better? How can I be the hero of the story? And you miss the whole point of compassion, the whole point of empathy, which is suffer with that person. Just simply be there, and that's all that's needed, for you to just be there with that person. And then under the gift that is compassion, she also speaks about what most of the time stands in the way of compassion, and that is boundaries. And when I first read this, it felt a bit counterintuitive, right? Because if you want to be that kind person, that really compassionate person, it feels like you must just give your all without any bounds. But in her research and in her studies, she saw that it was actually the opposite. The people that were able to be compassionate were the people that had boundaries. And she says that the thing is, you can be nice, but if you're nice without boundaries, you'll be nice, but also judgmental, but also resentful, but also angry on the inside. Have you ever found yourself in a position where you said yes to something that you didn't want to do? You said yes to something that you really did not want to do. For instance, let's say you said yes to accompanying your cousin to a town this Sunday. So, Kazi, can you please come with me to town this Sunday? Then now, okay, let's go. But from the very instant that your cousin was asking you, you knew very well that you had other plans for Sunday. You can't just accompany them, but you say yes because you're a nice person, because you find it too hard to say no. Now here you are, right, extending your company, your time, your energy to this person, but on the inside you are resentful, you're getting annoyed, you're even in a rush, you want them to get done as fast as possible, and it's not a pleasant experience. But she says that that's what, to be a truly compassionate person and to do it with your whole heart, it requires you to say no when you have to say no. It requires you to be a person on your boundaries. And then this part got me. It said that setting boundaries and holding people accountable is a lot more work than shaming and blaming. So basically what she was saying here is that it takes a lot more to set those boundaries, to say no from the onset if you know that this is not your cup of tea, this is not what you're trying to do. But then what usually happens is that we end up shaming and we end up blaming, we end up gossiping about umuntu. Like, imagine emsebenzini, you have this colleague that you are failing to set boundaries with, right? And then they walk all over you. I say walk all over you because really it is you letting them walk all over you, but they walk all over you. And now you are busy complaining about this person. Man, she's such an inconsiderate person. She's so selfish. I just wish. You see? Because shaming and blaming is the path of least resistance, right? But it is toxic. It's toxic to your relationships, both professional and personal. And if you're a person who wants to live a life where you have healthy relationships, you gotta do what is harder, which is setting those boundaries. And most importantly, accountability, making those people accountable. Lastly, it's impossible to practice compassion from a place of resentment. If we're going to practice compassion and acceptance, we need boundaries and accountability. The last piece is connection. How she defines connection is that it is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. This was just so freaking beautiful. And the thing about it is that connection is a human need for every person, for everybody, and it has been neurobiologically proven so. And one thing that she speaks about in this part is that we need to let go of the myth of self-sufficiency. Yeah? Because somehow we have come to equate success with not needing anyone. Ring a bell? And she found that self-sufficiency is the biggest barrier to connection. It's the one thing that stands between us and connection. It's that a lot of people are okay with giving help but aren't okay with receiving, or are reluctant with receiving help. It's almost like we live in a world that's divided into two, where you have the people that need help and the people that offer help, when in reality we are all both. We are all people that need help and people that offer help. And the biggest thing is that until we can receive with an open heart, we can never really say that we give with an open heart. And she says that if you're a person who attaches judgment to receiving help, then you knowingly or unknowingly also attach judgment to giving help. Yeah? And so the thing about this is that attaching your self-worth to whether or not you need help, or to your self-sufficiency, or to your ability to do without anyone's help, is that you don't give yourself permission to fall apart. You never give yourself permission to be imperfect. And the reality of the situation is that you're human. You are imperfect and you will fall apart. So imagine how exhausting that life is, trying to keep up with this thing of having to be self-sufficient, having to never need anybody's help. Like you're constantly running on this hamster wheel. You end up being a person who's emotionally exhausted and a person who feels like they always give and never receive. Going back to the definition of connection, we need to remember that the energy that surges between people must travel in both directions. What I will touch on lastly is the things that get in the way. The things that get in the way of us living a wholehearted life. Shame, fear, and vulnerability. And Dr. Brene defines shame as the intensely painful feeling that we are unworthy of love and belonging. She goes on to say that we are not to make a mistake between shame and guilt. And she says that the difference between shame and guilt is that guilt says I did something bad, whereas shame says I am bad. You see the difference? What she found in her studies is that shame highly correlated with addiction, depression, eating disorders, violence, bullying, and aggression. And guilt, on the other hand, was inversely correlated with all these issues. So guilt is a good way to drive yourself to do better, right? So if you make a mistake and you apologize to someone, for instance, you say that I'm sorry for A, B, C, and D. It was a mistake. I shouldn't have done it that way, and I promise to do better next time, as opposed to I'm so sorry, I'm such an idiot, I'm so stupid, I don't know what's wrong with me, I'm such a mistake, you probably shouldn't even be my friend. That's the difference. Guilt drives you to actually become better, whereas shame is so debilitating that it actually just digs you deeper into this hole. And I used to say like a lot to myself. This was way back in primary school. I used to think that I'm a person who's very like guilt driven, or rather who has this debilitating guilt. Now that I look back, that was actually shame, because for whatever mistake that I did, I feared intensely and painfully that it would make me unworthy of love. And that's why it was so debilitating. So we need to differentiate between the two, and the biggest thing really is in self-talk. Pay attention to how you talk to yourself when you make mistakes, when you've done something wrong, when you've crumbled or whatever. Pay attention to your self-talk. Are you saying that I am a terrible person, or are you saying that I have done something terrible? The distinction is very significant. And then one last thing about shame is that shame cannot survive empathy. Shame thrives in secrecy. Shame thrives in making you feel like you are in it alone. And so Dr. Brown says that the best way to deal with shame is to speak about it. Speak about it. Talk to someone that has earned the right to hear your stories, but talk to someone, and be careful not to talk to that someone who will pity you instead of empathize, who will be disappointed in you because you've let them down, or who will downplay the situation like, oh no man, friend, you know what, you're overthinking this, it's not as deep as you think it is. Or the friend who will try to one-up you and say, you think that's bad? Wait till you hear what happened with me. Try to find a person who can that compassion, suffer with you. Person who can sit in that darkness with you and be like, you know what, I'll take this ride with you. And she says that it doesn't even need to be a whole lot of people, just one. If you have that one person in your life, you've done it. Because whenever you find yourself in a shame storm, she calls it a shame storm, whenever you find yourself in a shame storm, you know that you have that person to count on. And that's one way that we can counteract shame. The rest of the book, the actual meat of this book, speaks about the 10 guideposts to becoming a person who lives a wholehearted life. So Dr. Brene Brown goes into detail about some practical ways that you could implement this kind of wholehearted living, where you operate from a place of worthiness. But as I close this video, just to sum it up, for me, what it has done for me, first of all, it has helped me see or realize that these human experiences, such as imperfection, are actually gifts and not shortcomings. And secondly, it has redefined what courage, compassion, and connection means to me, and has challenged me to practice these beautiful gifts in my daily life. And then thirdly, it's that as different and as complex as we are as human beings, we are all in this together. We're all in this together, and ultimately we all just want to know that we are heard, we are seen, and we are valued. I really hope that you found value in today's video, and that you will go pick up this book, read it as well, and let me know what you think. If you have read it, you can comment down in the section below what were your favorite parts of the book. And lastly, I've been saying lastly, very lastly, the month of March is finally here, and this month we're going to be doing a whole lot of girl chat, and I am so freaking excited for that. And stay tuned, guys. I really hope you enjoy it.